Hello and welcome back to Outside Views. Today we're tackling a deeply troubling topic. The idea that the missteps of social democratic parties like Labour in the UK and the SPD in Germany are paving the way for the rise of far-right movements. This isn't just about electoral miscalculations, it's about the very survival of democratic principles in the face of a resurgent fascism. So let's dig deep into the historical context, the current political landscape, and the stakes involved. Social democracy has long been a cornerstone of Western politics. For much of the 20th century, parties like Labour and the Social Democrats in Germany shaped policies that expanded welfare states, improved workers' rights, and sought to balance capitalism with social justice. Their appeal lay in offering a progressive, inclusive vision of society while avoiding the extremes of communism and unchecked capitalism. But in recent years, their influence has waned dramatically. And let's start with Labour in the UK. After years of conservative dominance, Labour under Keir Starmer managed to reclaim power in 2024. Yet, his government's cautious, technocratic approach has drawn criticism from both the left and the right. Starmer's focus on stability and pragmatism, while understandable after the chaotic years of Brexit and the Tory rule, has left many wondering, where's the bold vision for the future? Labour's inability to address deep-seated economic and social inequalities risks alienating the very voters who brought them back to power. And now let's have a quick look at Germany. The SPD, led by Olaf Scholz, has faced similar challenges. Scholz's tenure as Chancellor has been marked by a reluctance to take decisive action on pressing issues like climate change, social inequality, and economic stagnation. Germany's export-driven economic model is under strain, and yet the SPD has struggled to articulate a compelling alternative. Like Labour, the SPD appears to be trapped in a cycle of managerialism, prioritizing short-term stability over long-term transformation. And this brings us to the core problem. The failure of these parties to act boldly is creating a vacuum in the political landscape. And nature abhors a vacuum. When social democratic parties falter, it's not the Greens or the Liberals who benefit most, it's the far right. In Germany, the AfD has seen a surge in support, capitalizing on economic anxieties and cultural fears. In the UK, while the first-past-the-post system has so far kept far-right parties out of parliament mostly, their influence is growing in public discourse and local politics. So how did we get here? To understand the present, we need to revisit the past. The decline of social democracy can be traced back to the neoliberal turn of the 1980s and 1990s. Under leaders like Tony Blair in the UK and Gerhard Schröder in Germany, Labour and the SPD embraced market-friendly policies, moving away from their traditional base of working-class support. While this shift brought electoral success at the time, it also laid the groundwork for disillusionment among voters who felt abandoned by the very parties that once championed their interests. Fast forward to the post-2008 financial crisis era, and this disillusionment has only deepened. Austerity measures, rising inequality, and stagnant wages have eroded trust in traditional parties. In the UK, Brexit became a lightning rod for this discontent, with many Leave voters expressing frustration not just with the EU, but with the entire political establishment, including Labour. In Germany, the refugee crisis of 2015 and the economic fallout from the pandemic have fueled support for the AfD, which positions itself as the voice of the forgotten Germans. And this is where the danger lies. When social democratic parties fail to address the root causes of economic and social inequality, they leave the door wide open for far-right populists to exploit these issues. The far right doesn't offer real solutions, but it excels at channeling anger and fear into electoral success, and their rhetoric often frames them as the only true representatives of the people, while painting opponents as elitist, out of touch, or even traitorous. The consequences of this trend are alarming, and history shows us what happens when the far right gains power. Democratic institutions are weakened, freedoms are curtailed, and marginalized communities bear the brunt of state-sanctioned oppressions. The rise of fascism in the 1930s serves as a stark warning. It wasn't just economic hardship that led to Hitler's and Mussolini's rise. It was also the failure of centrist and leftist parties to effectively counter this narrative. What's striking about today's context is how the lessons of history seem to be ignored. In the interwar years, the inability of democratic forces to present a united front against extremism proved catastrophic. Today, we see echoes of this disunity. Rather than building coalitions to address pressing issues, social democratic parties are often mired in internal conflicts and indecision. And this lack of focus undermines their credibility and alienates potential allies. And the media also play a critical role in this dynamic. Far-right narratives are amplified through sensationalist coverage, while social democratic efforts are often dismissed as lackluster or overly bureaucratic, which they often are, to be honest. And this creates a feedback loop where voters become more disillusioned with traditional parties and more receptive to populist messaging. Let's also consider the broader geopolitical context. The rise of authoritarian regimes around the world has emboldened far-right movements in Europe and beyond. Leaders like Viktor Orban in Hungary and Donald Trump in the US have shown how populist rhetoric can translate into policy that undermines democratic norms. For social democrats, the challenge is not just domestic but global in scope. So what can Labour and the SPD do to avoid repeating history? First, they need to reconnect with their base. And this means prioritizing policies that address economic inequality, improve living standards, and offer a tangible vision for a better future. I don't see a vision in either of these parties. And for Labour, this could involve bold investment in public services, housing, and green energy. And for the SPD, it means tackling Germany's economic challenges head-on, from transitioning to a sustainable economy to addressing democratic changes. And they didn't do that in 3 years. And second, they need to be unapologetic about their values. The far right thrives on painting its opponents as weak or indecisive. And by standing firm on issues like climate justice, social equality, and international cooperation, social democrats can offer a compelling alternative to the divisive rhetoric of populists. But not the SPD we see right now. And third, they must reform how they communicate. Traditional parties often struggle to connect with voters in an era dominated by social media and instant communication. Adopting more direct, emotionally resonant messaging can help counter the far right's narrative and engage a broader audience. And finally, they need to work collaboratively. The challenges we face, climate change, economic inequality, rising authoritarianism, are global in nature. By building alliances across borders, social democratic parties can amplify their impact and present a united front against the forces of division and hate. And the stakes couldn't be higher. Labour and the SPD have or had a historic opportunity to revitalize their parties and lead the fight for a more equitable democratic future. But this requires bold action, not cautious incrementalism. If they fail to rise to the occasion, the far right will continue to gain ground, and the consequences for our societies will be dire. So in conclusion, the resurgence of far-right movements is not an inevitability. It's a consequence of political failure. Social democratic parties must rise to the challenge by offering visionary leadership and tangible solutions to the problems facing their nations. The cost of inaction is too great to bear. So thank you for watching, and if you found this analysis insightful, please like and subscribe to the channel. And of course, in this case especially, I would like to know, what do you think about the challenges facing the social democratic parties today? Share your thoughts in the comments below the video, and we'll be back soon with more in-depth discussions on the future of democracy after Brexit. And until then, take care, stay informed, and the next video is right here in the end screen.